Good afternoon, all of you. My name is Adam Kerpel-Fronius, and I work at the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. But first of all, I would like to hand over the microphone to our organizer at the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Osteuropakunde, to Alesja Belanovich-Petz, to say a few words to us.
Дякую вялізны, Адам. Я таксама сардэчна вітаю ўсіх, хто зараз далучаецца онлайн да нашай дыскусіі, ці хто будзе пазней слухаць запіс нашай дыскусіі. У нас было больш за 40 рэгістрацый. Я бачу, што зараз у нас каля 15 слухачоў онлайн. Цудоўна, і мы пачынаем. Дазвольце на пачатку агучыць некалькі тэхнічных момантаў. Па-першае, наша дыскусія будзе на беларускай і на англійскай мовах. Калі вам патрэбны пераклад, у нас будзе адбывацца сімультанны пераклад, вы можаце выбраць мову ў наладках унізе, вам трэба націснуць на выяву глобуса, выбраць патрэбную мову, ці вы можаце таксама слухаць нашу дыскусію ў арыгінале. Адразу хочу за такую магчымасць падзякаваць нашым перакладчыкам Алесю Лагвінцу і Вераніцы Мазуркевіч. Другі тэхнічны момант, напэўна, вы яго ўжо заважылі, мы записываем нашу дыскусію. Наши дыскусіі вы можаце паслухаць на YouTube-канале арганізацыі. Наша дыскусія сёння адбываецца ў межах праекта нямецкага таварыства па даследаванню ўсходняй Европы «Форум гістарычных даследаванняў Беларусі». Гэты праект пачаў сваю працу ў пачатку 2022 года і за гэты час стаў ужо пляцоўкай для дыскусій, а таксама платформай для салідарнай падтрымкі рэпрэсаваных даследчыкаў Беларусі, якія таксама зараз знаходзяцца ў выгнанні і даследаванняў пра Беларусь. Мяне завуць Алесja Belanovich-Petz, я каардыную працу і дзейнасць форума. Тэма нашай дыскусіі сёння прысвечана асэнсаванню складаных пытанняў у даследаванні Халакоста ва ўсходняй Европе. Гэта дыскусія стала магчымай у першую чаргу дзякуючы Александру Фридману, які прапанаваў тэму і прапанаваў канцэпцыю. Калі мы дамаўляліся пра час правядзення нашай дыскусіі, мы хацелі адмыслова правесці яе напрыканцы кастрычніка, бо 80 гадоў таму, падчас нацысцкай акупацыі Беларусі, адбывалася так званая ліквідацыя мінскага гета. За крыху больш чым 2 гады існавання, больш за 100 000 жыхароў гета, а гэта былі беларускія яўрэі і яўрэйкі, і замежныя яўрэі і яўрэі, былі забіты. Халакост лічыцца з адной найлепш даследаваных тэм у Германіі прынамсі. Але наколькі гэта так? І якія праблемныя тэмы існуюць да гэтага часу? Як на даследаванні пра Халакост уплываюць палітычныя падзеі і грамадскія выклікі? І тут неабходна адзначыць, што сама дыскусія прысвечана складаным пытанням у даследаванні Халакоста, але і самі нашы эксперты зараз знаходзяцца ў складанай сітуацыі вайны. Я вельмі ўдзячна Марце і ўдзячна Леоніду, якія, нягледзячы на такія складанасці, на гэту непростую сітуацыю, далі згоду на ўдзел у нашай дыскусіі. Шчыра вам дзякую. Дазвольце, я пачну прадстаўляць нашых экспертак і экспертаў з Марты. Марта Havryshko, украінскі гісторык, была вымушана з'ехаць разам з сынам з Украіны з пачаткам паўнамаштабнай вайны Расіі супраць Украіны. Марта падключылася зараз да нас са Злучаных Штатаў Амерыкі і знаходзіцца зараз са сваім даследчым праектам і як выкладчыца ва ўніверсітэце Кларка. Марта сваю дысертацыю напісала на тэму нацыянал-сацыялізму Германіі ў грамадскай думцы Галіччыны з 1933 па 1939 год. Займаецца даследаваннем сексуальнага гвалта на вайне, гендернай гісторыі Другой сусветнай вайны. У дадзены момант Марта працуе над кнігай пра сексуалізаваны сексуальны гвалт падчас Халакоста ва ўкраіне. Акрамя таго, Марта ўваходзіць у міжнародную групу даследчыц і даследчыкаў сексуальнага гвалта ва ўзброеных канфліктах. У нямецкіх медыа ў апошнія часы было шмат інтэрв'ю і таксама матэрыялаў з Мартай у дачыненні да згвалтавання ўкраінак расійскімі салдатамі. Вельмі раю вам прачытаць гэта інтэрв'ю і матэрыялы. Да нас падключыўся з Ізраіля Leonid Rein. Гэта гісторык, У нашай падрыхтоўцы Адам звярнуўся да Леаніда нават як да ветэрана даследаванняў Холакоста, даследавання Холакоста ў Беларусі, але і не толькі. Леонид з'яўляецца даследчыкам Холакоста у былым Савецкім Саюзе. І таксама на дадзены момант з'яўляецца супрацоўнікам Міжнароднага інстытута па вывучэнню гісторыі Холакоста пры мемарыяле Яд Вашем. Я думаю, што многім нашым слухачам з Беларусі будзе вядома праца Леонида пра калабарацыянізм падчас Другой сусветнай вайны ў Беларусі. Гэта праца была перакладзена на беларускую мову у 2015 годзе выдавецтвам «Архея» і называецца «Каралі і пешкі. Калабарацыі ў Беларусі ў час Другой сусветнай вайны». Я вельмі спадзяюся, што вы застанецеся з намі, з Леонид. Я ведаю, што вы папярэдзілі, што могуць быць абстрэлы з боку Хамас.
Ужо было, але я застаўся.
Леонид, але насамрэч я вельмі вас прашу, ваша бяспека – гэта самае галоўнае. Гэта будзе абсалютна нармальна, калі вы проста выйдзеце з нашай дыскусіі і калі будзе магчымасць, проста паспрабуеце зараз вярнуцца.
Нічога страшного, ужо прайшло, уже скончылось.
Тым не менш, калі ласка, ваша бяспека – гэта галоўнае. Я пераходжу да Александра Фридмана, пра якога я ўжо згадала на пачатку. Александр Фридман – гісторык, вядомы шырокай беларускай публіцы зараз і як палітычны каментатар. Александр абараніў сваю дысертацыю на тэму «Вобразы Германіі ў беларускім савецкім грамадстве» з 1919 па 1941 год. Прапаганда і вопыт. Александр з'яўляецца выкладчыкам універсітэта імя Генріха-Гейна ў Дюссельдорфе. Асноўныя навуковыя інтарэсы – гэта савецкая гісторыя, гісторыя яўрэяў ва ўсходняй Еўропе, гісторыя спорта і нацыянал-сацыялізм. Und last but not the least, я пераходжу да нашага мадэратара Адама Керпеля-Фрониуса. Адам нарадзіўся ў Будапешце, навучаўся ў Фрайбургу і ва Вроцлаве, гісторык, навуковы супрацоўнік фундацыі «Мемарыял» ахвярам Холакоста ў Берліне. Я думаю, што многім беларускім і нямецкім даследчыкам Адам вядомы як адзін са стваральнікаў выставы «Лагер смерці. Малы трасцянец. Гісторыя і памяць». Гэта быў нямецка-беларускі праект, які дапамог замацаваць у грамадскім успрыманні лагер знішчэння Малы трасцянец каля Мінска як месца еўрапейскіх злачынстваў і памяці. Дазвольце напрыканцы літаральна хвілінку для рэкламы нашага наступнага мерапрыемства, якое адбудзецца ў Берліне 9 лістапада. Прынамсі, Александр Фридман і Адам Керпель-Фрониус таксама прымаюць удзел у нашай публічнай дыскусіі. Гэта будзе публічная дыскусія пра памяць, пра Холакост у Беларусі і ў Германіі. Калі вы знаходзіцеся ў Берліне, мы будзем вельмі рады вас бачыць. Мы таксама інфармацыю пра нашу публічную дыскусію 9 лістапада зараз апублікуем у чаце. Таксама я хацела б напрыканцы падзякаваць маёй каляжанцы Елізавеце Вундервальд, якая падтрымлівае нас арганізацыйна ў правядзенні гэтай дыскусіі. І на гэтым я заканчваю уводзіны, перадаю слова Адаму і жадаю нам усім плённай дыскусіі і ў першую чаргу жадаю Леоніду, калі ласка, калі будзе бяспека і абстрэлы, беражыце сабе і сыходзьце лепш туды, дзе небяспечна. Дзякую. Адам, табе слова.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alesja, for this introduction. And I'm very happy and very honored to be here. I also have the privilege to see the names of all the people who are watching us live in this discussion. And I'm very happy to see a lot of people, a lot of names I know. Most of these names I got to know through this project about Mali Trostnets, which has just been mentioned. And so I also want to welcome them. And also it has to be said, if you're watching this on YouTube in 2 or 3 years' time, this is the 24th of October, 2023. So we are 17 days after the atrocious, barbaric terrorist attacks on Israel. So we are all probably very much, some of you much more, but very much personally affected by this. And if Leonid has to go, he has to go. If there's an aerial attack, but this is the times we live in now. And this also shows with all these emotions coming up about anti-Semitism and all these discussions coming up nowadays, it just seems that history is always catching up with us. And these are some of the things we are going to talk about today. Today, normally I would probably start to my first question with Marta, but we have a 2/3 majority for Belarus in this round. So I think I will go from north to the south, and especially from also with one of the veterans of Holocaust researchers, and there is Leonid. So I will start with him near Tel Aviv, because he has been researching the Holocaust in Belarus for a very long time now, and also he has written about how research has been done in Belarus. As far as I can understand, in a very simplified way, until 1991, there was no real Holocaust research yet. And after that, mostly Jewish scholars or Jewish intellectuals started to deal with it, which also already signifies that somehow the Holocaust has never really become part of a national narrative. So I would like to talk about that. How has this changed? Did you see an arc or a development of how the Holocaust was being researched in Belarus by Belarusian scholars inside Belarus and outside of Belarus during the years up to 2020 being obviously a breaking point, but did you see that it became a broader scope? The discourse has become broader, or was it always a fringe subject which was always dealt with only by a handful of people? Did you see any development prior to 2020, and if yes, in what way?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Well, there is until actually 2020, I would say it is actually kind of a watershed for the Holocaust research, and not in a good sense, I would say. Now, in Belarus itself, today the Holocaust research is still quite underdeveloped. But what happened after 2020 is actually the instrumentalization of the Holocaust topic for the regime's policies, for the regime's agendas. Actually, the Holocaust was put into the context of the genocide of the Belarusian people, Belarusian nation, in the broader context of the genocide of Belarusian nation. And here it is actually an interesting phenomenon, because it all started with Lukashenko's speeches during the Independence Day ceremony, like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Alex can correct me. When he said that, you see, actually the Jews have their Holocaust, so they are untouchable. So we Belarusians too now need to have our own, so to say, the genocide of Belarusians. And we did suffer, and it's actually undeniable that Belarus as a country suffered greatly under the Nazi occupation. It's no question. It was practically razed to the ground after the Germans withdrew from this country. But today, in the Lukashenko's, under Lukashenko regime, it was instrumentalized, and it also was instrumentalized in the most loathsome, I would say, manner. When the people there are opening the graves, the mass graves of the Holocaust victims, which were already known since Soviet Extraordinary Commission opened them right after the war. They are opening them, they are declaring that they are just discovered these mass graves, and they now proclaiming these graves as the graves of the victims of the genocide of Belarusian people. So that is actually how it is being instrumentalized, all this topic. And again, for the officially, Lukashenko makes a difference between the Holocaust and the genocide of Belarusian people. He said it in his speech, which I just mentioned, and also in the famous or as an infamous interview he gave also like a few years ago to the BBC. But now also in Belarus, what is happening here, it's that the Holocaust research was embedded on the one side, was embedded into the general context of the genocide of Belarusian people. And on the other hand, it was taken out of the historical research. It actually became the matter of the judicial matter. Now it's basically criminal. It made criminalized to question the genocide of Belarusian, even to discuss the genocide of Belarusian nation. So basically, it was taken out of the historical context and put under the judicial, in the judicial area.
And you have also been someone who has researched the collaboration by local Belarusians during the war, which is a subject which is also coming up sometimes, being instrumentalized also by the regime.
It's also very interesting because we can say that before 2020, collaboration was practically no issue in Belarus. It was research only kind of on the margins, and the historians like myself who dealt with this topic couldn't have and still cannot get access to the relevant archival sources. But what happened after August 2020 is actually that it was discussed once again. It is being discussed in the context of this regime's policy. It was collaboration. The collaborators are portrayed as the main perpetrators, acting under the Belarusian national flag, and the opposition, actually the opposition to the Lukashenko's regime, is now portrayed as a direct descendants of these collaborators, of the Nazi collaborators. But once again, there is no serious research. It's rather, once again, political issue, but not a topic for serious historical research.
Which will probably bring us to Alexander and question to him, because he has also written extensively about the new laws about the genocide against the Belarusian people. In that context, well, two things which are interesting for me, because we have been talking about the regime and their way of instrumentalizing politics, but also since 2020, at the latest, we know there's also another Belarus, another Belarusian public, people who are trying to establish an alternative discourse or an alternative narrative about their nation, and it has shown 2020 very, very strong resilience, and also has shown what a strong civil society Belarus could be under more democratic and free circumstances. So these discussions about the Holocaust and a lot of scholars have moved to outside of Belarus, and a lot of them are here in Germany also. So do you think that when talking about the Holocaust, is it being integrated somehow into Belarusian national historical narrative, or is it something which is more annoying because it's somehow something which is also only related to the Jewish experience and somehow not part of the Belarusian experience? How is it being integrated, and what does it say about the discourse, the state of discourse of national identity today? Not necessarily on the regime side, but on the other side.
Дзякуй за пытанне. Гэта насамрэч вельмі цікавае пытанне. Я б сказаў, што тэма Холокосту яна застаецца маргінальнай для ўсіх частак беларускай гістарыяграфіі, як для дзяржаўнага боку, як для рэжыма, як Леонид слушна сказаў, які выкарыстоўвае гэтую тэму ў сваіх палітычных мэтаў. Но што тычыцца супрацьлеглага боку, і гэта, дарэчы, зразумела, зараз у беларускіх гісторыкаў, якія знаходзяцца за мяжой і працуюць за мяжой, у іх іншыя прыярытэты і іншыя тэмы. І зразумела, Холокост да гэтых прыярытэтаў не належыць. Калі ж мы ўсё ж такі пойдзем трошкі глыбей у гісторыю, Леонид ужо шмат з гэтага згадаў, я, можа, толькі некалькі момантаў яшчэ правяду. У 90-е гады і на пачатку нулявых гадоў, безумоўна, Холокост лічыўся ў Беларусі тэмай выключна яўрэйскай. Амаль усе тыя людзі, якія гэтай тэмай займаліся гэтай тэмай не апошнюю чаргу з прычыны свайго паходжання, бо яны лічылі сябе яўрэямі і лічылі патрэбным даследаваць гэты перыяд гісторыі, гэты жахлівы перыяд гісторыі Беларусі, перыяд гісторыі сваіх продкаў. Паступова, аднак, сітуацыя ў Беларусі трошки змянілася. У 10-е гады, напрыклад, ужо прысутнічалі даследчыкі, якія займаліся гэтымі тэмамі і займаліся не з прычыны свайго паходжання, а таму, што яны гэтымі тэмамі цікавіліся. Значную ролю тут адыграла, напрыклад, нямецкі праект «Гістарычная майстэрня», які працаваў яшчэ да сённяшняга часу, працуе ў Беларусі, і адыграў таксама значную ролю ў вывучэнні Холокосту на тэрыторыі Беларусі. У 20-м годзе тэма набрала такі ўжо выключна палітычны характар. Сапраўды, дзяржаўная прапаганда адкрыла для сябе гэтую тэму і выкарыстоўвае яе ў не апошнюю чаргу для змагання з дэмакратычным рухам, прычым робіць гэта вельмі так па-дылетанцку, заўважае, што гэтая тэма асабліва не даследавана. Вось тут у нас у дыскусіі прысутнічае чалавек, які шмат зрабіў для даследавання гэтай тэмы. Фактычна той, хто жадае займацца беларускай калабарацыяй і нават паспрабуе выкарыстоўваць гэтую тэму ў палітычных мэтах, для гэтага дастаткова толькі адчыніць даследаванне Леоніда Рейна, прачытаць іх і выкарыстаць. Ну, напэўна, тое, што Леонид з'яўляецца яўрэйскім даследчыкам, ізраільскім даследчыкам, гэта перашкаджае беларускай дзяржаўнай прапагандзе звярнуцца да яго твораў, а гэта зрабіць сапраўды досыць лёгка, бо галоўны твор Леоніда Рейна перакладзены на беларускую мову і даступны ў Беларусі. То бок зараз мы назіраем вось такую палітычную інструменталізацыю з боку уладаў, прычым яна мае сапраўды абсалютна нахабны характар. Гэта не вывучэнне Холокосту, бо практыкі уладаў яны амаральныя і ганебныя. Што яны робяць? Яны бяруць яўрэйскіх ахвяраў, прынамсі яны рабілі гэта да апошняга. Яны бралі яўрэйскіх ахвяраў, выкрэслівалі іх паходжанне і далучалі іх да сваёй канцэпцыі генацыду беларускага народу. Трэба, аднак, адзначыць, што апошнім часам, там на працягу апошняга года, апошніх месяцаў, тон дзяржаўнай прапаганды трошки змяніўся. Я думаю, што гэта звязана з пратэстамі дзяржавы Ізраіль, з інтэрвенцыямі ізраільскай амбасады, і ў Мінску зразумелі, што так, для вось гэтага пытання трэба ставіцца больш асцярожна. То бок, канешне, яны ад сваіх гістарычных канцэпцыяў не адмовіліся і будуць працягваць у гэтым накірунку, але робяць гэта больш асцярожна. Прынамсі, больш ужо ахвяраў генацыду, ахвяраў Холокосту так не залічваюць адзін да аднаго да ахвяраў генацыду беларускага народу. Ну а што тычыцца, яшчэ раз паўтаруся, незалежных беларускіх гісторыкаў, якія мусяць працаваць за мяжой, ну у іх, у большасці з іх традыцыйна былі іншыя пункты, іншыя тэмы, якімі яны займаліся, яны працягваюць гэтым займацца. Сярод даследчыкаў, якія працуюць за мяжой, шмат медыявістаў, шмат людзей, якія займаюцца гісторыяй беларускай тэрыторыі Беларусі ў 19 стагоддзі і гэтак далей. Яўрэйская гісторыя, праблемы Холокосту проста не належаць да іх галоўных тэмаў. Ці гэта зменіцца ў будучыні, паглядзім. Пэўныя пазітыўныя тэндэнцыі ўжо назіраюцца, калі дэмакратычны беларускі рух пэўны працяглы час просто не рэагаваў на выпадкі антысемітызму ў Беларусі, не рэагаваў на канцэпцыю генацыду беларускага народу, то вось зараз сітуацыя трошки змянілася у сувязі з падзеямі ў Ізраілі. Тая рэакцыя, якая пайшла з боку дэмакратычных сілаў, якія адназначна падтрымалі дзяржаву Ізраіль, якія выразілі салідарнасць і спачуванне, у тым ліку і выхадцам з Беларусі яўрэйскага паходжання, якія жывуць у Ізраілі, гэта такі пазітыўны крок, які сведчыць пра тое, што дэмакратычныя сілы, будем спадзявацца, будуць разглядаць у будучыні, ці ўжо разглядаюць яўрэйскае мінулае Беларусі як частку беларускай гісторыі і тых людзей яўрэйскага паходжання, якія паходзяць з Беларусі, жывуць у дадзены момант за межамі Беларусі, што іх таксама разглядаюць як у шырокім такім сэнсе, як частку беларускай прасторы.
Thank you very much. I would like to stay with this point for a while because whether or not there were any changes, because we are almost providing a model that it hasn't really changed between 1991 and 2020, and the Holocaust has always been a marginal topic. But this is anecdotal evidence because of this exhibition about Mali Trostnets. I visited Belarus a couple of times during those years, and I've been, of course, to the Museum of the Great Patriotic War, and in that exhibition the Holocaust plays a very, very marginal, very small role, but also our exhibition was shown in that museum and a lot of people came. I've been at opening exhibitions, openings in Vitebsk and in Bobroysk, and it was always very interesting to see the audience coming because some of them were there because they were veterans of the Second World War and old people, and they were there at these openings, but sometimes really a local public came, audience came, and they seemed really interested. So so that could have been a window of opportunity to somehow open it up a bit more. And one more thing, do you have any feeling, one of my questions would be, has there been a tendency that the Holocaust becomes much more an integrated part somehow of Belarusian historical discourse? And the other thing is, do we have any idea how effective is the propaganda now about this genocide against Belarusian people? Do people think this is bullshit? And sorry for using this word, but this is just state propaganda, which doesn't matter? Or is it something which somehow maybe does stay in the heads, and we talk about these problems, that the numbers, if we need the Jews as victims, then it's great because it makes the number of murdered Belarusians higher. But if we are talking about genocide against the Belarusian people, they simply don't count. So my question would be, do we have any idea whether or not it's effective or not?
Я думаю, што сапраўды пэўная цікавасць, канешне, назіраецца, і гэта звязана з цэлым комплексам тэндэнцый, якія мы зараз маем. З аднаго боку, падзеі 20-го года, абсалютна драматычныя падзеі для вялікай колькасці беларусаў, сотні тысяч людзей, якія вымушаны былі пакінуць Беларусь, больш за 1500 чалавек, якія прызнаны палітычнымі зняволенымі і знаходзяцца ў Беларусі за кратамі, рэпрэсіі, прычым нават таталітарныя тэндэнцыі, якія ўжо назіраюцца ў беларускім грамадстве. Усё гэта выклікае цікавасць да іншых таталітарных рэжымаў і да іх злачынстваў. Гэта назіралася ў 20-м годзе. Шматлікія беларусы імкнуліся асэнсаваць, што адбываецца з іх краінай, што робіць рэжым з грамадзянамі. Таму і былі гэтыя параўнанні з Холокостам, з нацысцкімі злачынствамі, зразумелыя перабольшванні, зразумелая ў пэўным сэнсе інструменталізацыя, але гэта прывяло да таго, што цікавасць сярод простых людзей, цікавасць да Холокосту сапраўды з'явілася. Яшчэ адзін фактор, ён таксама ўплывае, гэта дзяржаўная прапаганда, у якой тэма вайны акцэнтуецца, тэма вайны стала прысутнічае, пра яе размаўляюць, і таксама раз-пораз з'яўляецца інфармацыя і пра Холокост, і пра злачынствы Холокосту. То бок тэма больш шчыльна сёння прысутнічае ў беларускім грамадстве. Гэтага не было до 20-го года. До 20-го года Холокост адыгрываў абсалютна маргінальную ролю ў культуры памяці у Беларусі, у навучальнай сістэме. Но вось зараз прыйшлі гэтыя імпульсы, і гэта дае пэўны шанец. Што тычыцца другога пытання, я думаю, што рэжым Лукашэнкі можа мець поспех з гэтай канцэпцыяй геноциду беларускага народу. Чаму? Ну, па-першае, канцэпцыя абсалютна савецкая, у прынцыпе, з'яўляецца рэінкарнацыяй савецкіх наратываў і таму блізкая значнай колькасці людзей, якія жывуць у Беларусі, маюць савецкае мінулае і маюць нават пэўную настальгію па савецкім часе. Па-другое, гэтая канцэпцыя абвяшчае галоўнымі ахвярамі нацысцкіх злачынстваў нейкіх чужых для большасці беларусаў яўрэяў, не гледзячы ўжо не ўзгадваючы там пра цыганоў і пра іншыя групы насельніцтва, яна абвяшчае галоўнымі ахвярамі геноциду саміх беларусаў. То бок гэтая канцэпцыя блізкая. Простым людзям кажуць, вось вы, вашыя продкі пастрадалі больш ад другіх. Там ёсць гэты яўрэйскі халакост, вось як узгадваў Леонид, но гэта чужы, гэта вас не тычыцца. А вось мы пастрадалі, ну не менш, чым гэтыя яўрэі. І ў гэтай сітуацыі, калі цябе вось такую ролю ахвяры даюць, што ты там твои продкі не ўдзельнічалі ў злачынствах, твои продкі змагаліся з нацызмам з аднаго боку, з другога боку былі ахвярамі. Гэта для шмат каго, канешне, такая прыемная канцэпцыя, якая можа дасягнуць пэўных поспехаў. Ацэніць гэта вельмі цяжка, бо незалежнай сацыялогіі ў Беларусі няма і быць не можа ў сённяшніх умовах, але патэнцыял для поспеху ёсць. Што, напэўна, яшчэ тычыцца тэмы Холакоста, вось адну рэч я ўсё ж такі ўзгадаў, уплывае, канешне, і вайна ва ўкраіне, якая ідзе. Ну, ва ўкраіне гэта ўвогуле вядомы наратыў, гэтыя параўнанні з лёсам яўрэяў, што сёння з украінцамі адбываецца тое ж самае, што было ў нацысцкія часы з яўрэямі. І вось гэты наратыў, ён таксама заходзіць у Беларусь, асабліва заходзіць для тых людзей, якія спачуваюць у краіне. То бок, вось гэтая прысутнасць параўнання ва ўкраіне ўплывае, канешне, у пэўнай ступені на дыскурс у Беларусі, паўплывае на тых людзей, якія спачуваюць у краіне, у пэўнай ступені таксама і на тых, хто знаходзіцца на расійскім баку, бо тая ж беларуская дзяржаўная прапаганда, яна гэты дыскурс высмейвае і паказвае, што гэта ўсё лухта, гэта прыдумкі, гэтага нічога няма, што Расія насамрэч нібыта вызваляе Украіну.
I wanted also to add some point about the internalization of this narrative of the genocide of Belarusian nation in today's Belarus. We must also remember important point in Belarus today. Very little is known actually about the Holocaust. There is practically no Holocaust education in schools. So people, okay, it's only facilitating the identification, this embedment of the Holocaust into the general narrative of the genocide of Belarusian people. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we are going to jump a bit, first of all, over the Atlantic into Massachusetts, but also to Ukraine. And obviously, there are big differences. Belarus has become quite, well, a very authoritarian dictatorship in the last couple of years. Ukraine has gone the other way, has become a ever freer country and ever more democratic country, but is waging, well, a war of independence and is in complete existential threat against a war of aggression. So that makes is a completely different context. But would you like to tell us a few things about how you, how is your position in Holocaust research, and how are you being assessed by the others in this discourse? You are, of course, touching on very difficult subjects such as sexual crimes against Jewish women, especially by local Ukrainian collaborators. Is it something where people, not only from nationalistic sides, will attack you for being so outspoken about these aspects of history? And also later on, I would like to talk about maybe one or two issues which have come up in the last couple of weeks. One of them, something which happened in Canadian Parliament, and something which has to do with how to deal with memory of Babin Yar, considering what is going on in 2023. So the floor is yours, Marta.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and let me express my solidarity with Israeli people and Belarus people who are now facing this tyranny and terror. I want to say that after the full-scale invasion, Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many things change in Ukraine in terms of politics of memory, in terms of memorialization practices. And what I observe, and it's very troubling tendency, nowadays, some memory agents in Ukraine are trying to instrumentalize memory of the Holocaust and even appropriate actually those sufferings of Jewish people in order to attract attention to sufferings of Ukrainian people during Russian invasion. They are trying to compare the loss of everyday lives of Ukrainians nowadays who are in survival mode, of course, with the fate of Jewish people. And I believe it's very troubling. But the most troubling tendency nowadays, especially after 24th February, for me, 2022, is the nationalistic turn in Ukraine historiography and Ukraine memory politics. This nationalistic turn, one of the signs of this nationalistic turn is actually whitewashing the history, and it's similar to Belarus, actually. This historical narrative, meta-narrative, is trying to play with victimhood of Ukrainian people on the one hand and with heroism of Ukrainian people. And in this narrative, there is no place for involvement in the Holocaust. There is no place for perpetrators. For example, recently, key Ukraine memory agents, Ukraine National Remembers Institute, released a video. This video is a part of these efforts to tackle, Russian propaganda, Kremlin propaganda. And this is video about Oun and Dupin. What we learned from this video that Oun and Dupin fought against two powers, Nazis and Soviets. They were good guys fighting against bad guys. But we can't find any traces of, any mentions of the involvement of Oun and Dupin members in the hunting Jews during the Holocaust, in persecuting Jews, in ethnic cleansing of Polish people in the territory of Ukraine. We can't find any traces, any signs, any mentioning of the fact that so many leaders of Oun and Dupin and ordinary members previously were members of auxiliary police, and they actually facilitated Holocaust. They were a participant of the Holocaust, in many cases willing participants of the Holocaust. I'm dealing with sexual violence during the Holocaust in Ukraine, and I know from my research that sexual violence against Jewish women and girls wasn't allowed. It was punishable crime. So when members of police units or members of Ukraine Nationalist Underground or ordinary Ukraine men humiliated Jewish women and girls in sexual way, it was their own choice, and they carry responsibility for this choice. They did this not because of the pressure of Nazi powers, of Nazi occupiers, but because they really want to humiliate, to exercise their power over vulnerable Jewish people. That's why this, adult discussion is so important for Ukrainian society nowadays. But the problem is that those historians who are trying to touch upon these, inconvenient topics, they face threats from both far radical groups and those who present themselves as liberal nationalists. For example, Hunka case, we all observed this scandal, political scandal in Canada Parliament when veteran of Waffen-SS division Galicia was invited, and he received this standing ovation, and the chair of parliament was not actually aware that he was a member of Waffen-SS Galicia. So he was a Nazi veteran and probably, facilitator of Nazi crimes in Slovakia, for example, or Slovenia and other places. So we know the reaction of Canadian society, but at the same time in Ukrainian society, we observe very different reaction. When, Deputy Minister of Education claimed that Hunka is a hero, when some Ukrainian historians, professors of Ukraine universities, some professors of some prestigious universities claim that he was a hero and Ukraine state should honor them. When, people who are in charge of Ukraine National Institute of Remembrance claim that Ukraine should follow actually the example of Baltic states, who are now honoring their own, collaborators with Nazis. So what is happening now is actually whitewashing of history and marginalizing the complicity of local people in the Holocaust and other war crimes, the crimes against humanity. And very striking was exhibition in the Museum of Kiev, where it was, exhibition, photo exhibition, where it was, displayed, there were displayed photos of different military units in 20th century, including UPAR and OUN, and those units were compared with photographs of actual Ukraine defenders, of actual members of Ukraine military nowadays. And this exhibition was opened by Ukraine Ministry of Culture. And one of the pictures actually portrayed the members of Waffen-SS Galicia, and they were compared with current Ukrainian soldiers. And when I criticized this, I faced a harsh reaction and response from some, far-right groups, including Azov movement, but also from my peers, from my colleagues from Ukraine academia. So what is going on nowadays in Ukraine is really, really troubling. And we should face this, reality and fight with this, Holocaust distortion, with this, whitewashing of history, and with this competing victimhood. Because we know that in Ukraine nowadays, the memory of the Holodomor is over memory of Holocaust. Memory of Holodomor is presented as Ukraine national tragedy, while memory of Holocaust is presented as the tragedy of Jews, those other people, those who are not majority nowadays in Ukraine, those who are not present, those who are vanished basically. So it's very, I believe it's very troubling, and we should talk about this and face this.
Thank you very much. And before I go back to this, there's one thing I have to say as a moderator. There are 24 people. There are some people watching us live, and they can also ask us questions. There's this question and answer button, and you are very welcome to put your questions in this chat, and then I will come back to them. I've already seen one, which I will ask later on. But now back to the discussion. This is an incredibly difficult subject because this touches on the very question: is it possible at all to talk about these things, or to find a new common ground for discussion during the times of war, or is it just a totally exceptional time? Then we just have to just accept the fact that everybody's overreacting in all the ways. So probably this is an argument you probably hear all the time and every day from your peers. So how would you react to that? One thing, and the other thing is, could you tell us a bit about well, in German we have a word for it called shitstorm. What can happen to you on social media, and you happen to be at the crosshairs of a lot of discussions. And a few days ago there was a discussion about is Babin Yar necessary after Bucha? So this is a thing about, there was a discussion in inner Ukrainian discussions about how to commemorate the Second World War and especially the Holocaust after Bucha, whether or not we, in parentheses, need this memory at all, or is everything going to be overshadowed by the current war?
Thank you so much. It's a very important discussion. So I just want to say that, yes, several days ago, or maybe even, maybe even weeks nowadays, it was announced a discussion with the title, as you mentioned, Do we need the Babin Yar after Bucha? And this discussion actually was organized by this Museum of Kyiv, where this infamous exhibition about, with this photo of members of Waffen-SS Galicia was displayed. And this discussion was supported by key memory agent in Ukraine National Remembrance Institute, which was very troubling, and it provoked such a hot discussion in social media, and many people were furious because those who are working with Holocaust memory in Ukraine, with Holocaust education, know how many problems actually are still in Ukraine with Holocaust memory. Because after 1991, Ukrainians made a very important step. They recognized, they learned about the Holocaust, they recognized its tragedy, but they don't want, many of Ukrainians don't want to take a step further and recognize own complicity, in the Holocaust. So, and today, because of so many Russian crimes and, war crimes, crimes against humanity in Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, and other occupied territories, people were so terrified by those crimes. People were so angry, so desperate, that now those war crimes, Russian war crimes, they really overshadowed the memory of the Holocaust. But I really believe that we should tackle this tendency because some Ukrainians even claim we are new Jews nowadays. So this some sort of Holocaust distortion as well. This is simplification of the Holocaust and instrumentalization of the Holocaust. So, and I can't even imagine that someone will put discussion under the title, Do we need Holodomor after Bucha? I can't imagine this sort of discussion in today's Ukraine, because nowadays, due to the memory politics in Ukraine, over 20% of Ukrainians recognize Holodomor as genocide. And those commemorating practices in Ukraine involve so many people. People light candles, people mourn, people show their solidarity with, those victims and so on. But we do not observe the same in terms of Holocaust memory. Why? Because Holocaust memory involved so many inconvenient questions regarding Own and Uba, who after 2015 memory loss recognized as freedom fighters and heroes. And nobody wants to talk about their involvement in the Holocaust. Nobody wants to talk about anti-Jewish violence at the beginning of Barbarossa in beginning of July 1941. When I wrote my article about female perpetrators of these anti-Jewish pogroms in Western Ukraine, in July 1941, I was summoned by my supervisor, and he asked me to be careful. And he told me, you are writing like a Jew, not as a Ukrainian. You should remember your citizenship. And, so every time when nowadays especially, when you are trying to undermine this hegemonic narrative, you face criticism, you face threats. So what is the consequences of that? The consequences is beautifully described in Anna Arendt works about this danger, about this fear, and about self-censorship of historians. Many historians in Ukraine who are physically in Ukraine, some of them can't leave Ukraine due to different factors. They can't freely express their thoughts. They can't freely write something because they really afraid this harsh reaction, this criticism. They afraid to lose their jobs. They're afraid for their family members. That's why I really feel privileged to be in safe environment, supported by my colleagues here at Clark University at Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, where I can freely research and freely, discuss these inconvenient questions. And I really believe this is very important point, that those brave Ukrainian historians who are now trying to develop questions about the collaboration in Podillia region or in Kryvyi Rih, for example, or in Kharkiv region, or are writing about some branch of Ukrainian nationalists on the ground, like Melnik fraction and their participation in the Holocaust. They really need this support in terms of resources, in terms of access to archives, in terms of, feedback from their colleagues and so on. So I really believe that Holocaust research and Holocaust education in Ukraine really needs this international support nowadays. Thank you.
I'm always waiting a few seconds for the translation to finish, so that's why these pauses. This is anecdotal evidence, but this is one thing I wanted to say. We have a project at the Foundation Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe, which was supported by the German Foreign Office, and it's called Connecting Memory, and it's about a very decentralized way of creating a network of people on the ground in Ukraine, creating memorial sites. I think they put up over 21 memorial sites at mass grave sites of mass shootings. And the way they work is that they created a network with multiplicators and teachers and local people taking care of these things. And at the opening ceremonies, there were always a lot of local people involved, and this is something which is going on. But also it only works in places where you really have people who are voluntarily doing this kind of thing. And I heard that from a lot of discussions we had on this with my colleagues, that especially since February 24th, it was very important to keep this network alive, but they were also very, very often talking about the war which is going on now, and have been drawing parallels. So for many of them, it wasn't a contradiction to speak about the traumas which are going on now, and to at the same time to take care of the memorial sites to the Jewish victims in their places. So it's probably a very, very complex picture. Well, it remains to be seen what will come out of it. I would like to go back to Belarus and discussion. I've seen one question one comment in the Q&A section and a question. The comment was, I have to look at it now. Thank you for the invitation. It comes from Oleg Zhukov. Hi, Oleg. The topic is very interesting and worth of discussion. Just a small remark about instrumentalization. Position between Poland is a representative of the European Union and Russia make many contemporary historical studies difficult. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the comment. And there is one question from Sergei Novikov, who I also know from Minsk. And he says, basically, thank you, Leonid, Rein, you have made Rein, you have made the remark that there is no real research into Holocaust studies in Belarus. But what about two PhD projects which have been finished 2 decades ago, one of them by military historian Kavalenya, and what about Mr. Litvin? So is it something which you just forgot in the heat of discussion?
Yes, okay, yeah, I saw it. Actually, it's very important studies. Yes, they were done in the period of relative liberalism, when before the consolidation of Lukashenko's regime, and they really contributed quite much to the historical research on the topic of collaboration. However, this works practically unknown beyond the borders of Belarus. Both of these studies, both Kovalenko's studies on the Union of Belarusian Youth and Litvin's study, general study on the occupation and collaboration in Belarus, were written in Russian language. As far as I know, they were never translated into any other language. So important as they are, they have very little, in my opinion, very little influence on the research of the Holocaust overall, not just in Belarus.
Okay, thank you. Next question will be to Alexander. And what I would be interested in, because you are all old enough to have been born in the same state, the Soviet Union. If you are thinking about the Holocaust, do you, as intellectuals, think about the Holocaust as something which happened in different regions? So you think about the Holocaust in Belarus as a different entity than what happened in Ukraine? Do you have this border in your mind? And do you follow what is going on in Ukraine with regards to the Holocaust, or not follow it because it's another country? And also, how do you think? Well, is it possible to have a conversation between Ukrainians and Belarusians outside these borders and also far away from it? Because I've been involved, for example, in a podium discussion shortly after February, and there would have been someone invited from Kiev and someone invited from Minsk, but the person from Kiev said, sorry, we are good friends, but I'm not talking to you now because we are being shot at with rockets from your country. And as long as that is the case, sorry, I'm not talking to you. So do you think that a dialogue is still possible? And does it make sense to make such a big difference between Holocaust in Belarus and Ukraine, or is it one bigger story? Or would you say, okay, we should look at regions differently from case to case, because also inside Ukraine there are so huge differences, and also inside Belarus, obviously.
Ну, я пачну, напэўна, з маім уласным прыкладам. Няма украінскіх гісторыкаў, якія перасталі размаўляць са мной пасля шырокамаштабнага ўварвання Расійскай Федэрацыі на тэрыторыю Украіны. Ну, вось сёння у нас таксама ёсць прыклад, што Марта, якая актыўна займаецца таксама і расійскімі злачынствамі на тэрыторыі Украіны, абсалютна жахлівымі злачынствамі, у тым ліку і сексуальным гвалтам і гэтак далей. Яна размаўляе сёння з намі, яна дакладна ведае, што значная колькасць нашай сённяшняй публікі гэта людзі, якія паходзяць з Беларусі, і нават пэўная частка знаходзіцца ў Беларусі. І гэта не з'яўляецца праблемай. Мы павінны размаўляць, бо у нас розныя кантэксты, у нас розныя пазіцыі, але калі галоўнае у вызначэнні, у характарыстыку, у стаўленні, напрыклад, да вайны, калі нашы погляды супадаюць, канешне, мы можам і нават павінны размаўляць. Калі нашы погляды на вайну не супадаюць, і калі людзі, напрыклад, падтрымліваюць расійскую агрэсію супраць Украіны, ну, у гэтым выпадку нейкі дыскурс, ён ужо проста немагчымы. Тым больш немагчыма ў часы вайны. Вось, гэта першы момант, хаця, канешне, я чуў пра гэта, ёсць гісторыкі, украінскія гісторыкі, якія прынцыпова больш не размаўляюць з сваімі калегамі з Расіі ў Беларусі у незалежнасці ад той пазіцыі, якую яны займаюць. Ну, што тычыцца мяне, ну, напэўна, тут трэба ўзгадаць гэтую ўсё ж такі акалічнасць, яна досыць важная ў гэтым кантэксце, бо, напэўна, большасць украінскіх гісторыкаў, якія са мной размаўляюць, яны, можа, мяне нават не асацыююць з Беларусю з прычыны майго яўрэйскага паходжання, першае, і другое з той прычыны, што я ўжо больш за 20 гадоў у Беларусі не жыву. Ну, гэта так. Што тычыцца ўспрымання Холакосту, я, конечно, лічу, што нам патрэбна разглядаць падзеі Холакосту ў вельмі шырокім кантэксце. Калі мы гэта не будзем рабіць, мы не зразумеем асаблівасці таго ж Холакосту на тэрыторыі Беларусі. Вось я дакладна памятаю тыя дыскусіі, якія ў нас былі з Леонідам яшчэ напрыканцы 90-х, у пачатку нулявых гадоў, калі Леонід працаваў над сваёй тэмай, і вось ён да гэтага, ён можа больш пра гэта распавесці, ён займаўся гісторыі калабарацыянізму ў Літве, дзейнасцю розных літоўскіх фарміраванняў. Ну, прынамсі, тое, што ён займаўся гэтымі літоўскімі кейсамі, тым, што адбывалася на тэрыторыі Літвы, дазволіла яму зразумець асаблівасці Беларусі. Калі мы жадаем вывучаць беларускую калабарацыю, мы павінны, канешне, разглядаць і дзейнасць калабарацыі ва ўкраіне і ў краінах Балты. Тады мы лепш зразумеем становішча ў Беларусі. Калі мы жадаем разглядаць, як паводзіла сябе мясцовае насельніцтва ў дачыненні да Холакосту, удзел напрамую, там і розныя іншыя выдачы яўрэяў і гэтак далей, мы можам лепш за ўсё ацэніць асаблівасці Беларусі, калі мы будзем параўноўваць з Украінай, калі мы будзем параўноўваць з краінамі Балты, калі мы будзем параўноўваць з тэрыторыямі сённяшняй Расійскай Федэрацыі. Таму, канешне, гісторыя Холакосту ў Беларусі, як, дарэчы, ва ўкраіне, яна павінна вывучацца ў шырокім кантэксце гісторыі Холакосту на савецкіх тэрыторыях, ну і гісторыі Холакосту ў Еўропе. Тут гэтыя параўнанні, яны проста неабходныя, бо калі мы параўноўваем і ў гэтым сур'ёзным кантэксце разважаем, мы маем зусім іншы гарызонт для разумення ўсяго таго, што адбывалася.
Marta, you have been listening intently. Would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to say about the first point, about the conversation between Ukraine, Belarus, and Russian scholars. It's very tough question, very sensitive question, and I ask you for understanding for those people who refuse to talk with their colleagues from Belarus and Russia. People nowadays in Ukraine are deeply traumatized. They're deeply traumatized. I observe this. You know, I have a privilege because I have a distance. But those people, you know, recently, before moving to US, I visited Ukraine, and I spent 2 weeks in my native city, Lviv, in my home, and I survived 2 rocket attacks. And both rocket attacks were near my home, hundreds meters. And I'm not a religious person, but I was praying just to back to my child, you know, to be safe. I was praying for my, you know, relatives and so on. And those Ukrainian historians, for example, who are still living in Ukraine, and every single day, it could be the last day of their life or life of their children. They are really, you know, they are in constant trauma. And we should, you know, we should show our understanding for those people. But I personally really believe that we should build this dialogue, especially, you know, nowadays. It's very important to show solidarity with those people who are struggling against, you know, tyranny, against authoritarian regime, against terror, and so on. It's very, very important to be united in this, you know, in facing those challenges. Regarding the question, the second question was. Alex mentioned, I forgot. Alex mentioned the question. I want to say that it's very, very important nowadays for especially for Ukraine. Nowadays, I will refer to your question. Should we you know, challenge all this discourse, or should we be silent because of those, you know, current suffering and ongoing suffering of Ukrainian people? So I was asked, for the first time, I was asked this question last year in Boston during the conferences of Association of Jewish Studies. And I really believe that we shouldn't be silent, because nowadays, I remember 10 years ago when I started to talk about crimes of Ukraine nationalists, I was told by my supervisor, please stop your research and wait until the end of the war. So nowadays it's 10 years and nobody knows when the war will end. But we build Ukrainian society nowadays. It's an ongoing process. We as intellectuals, as Holocaust educators, are responsible for building this society, very inclusive, diverse, democratic society, with the based on idea of human rights, of the value of human lives, no matter to which ethnic group or to which national group people belong. It's our responsibility, and it's one of the main lesson of the Holocaust. When you see injustice, raise your voice, be active. Please avoid this, bystanding and so on. You can raise your voice. You can face all these challenges, and you can make a choice even under, this pressure. So I really believe that we should talk about this now, because instrumentalization of history of the Holocaust and World War II is going now. It was one of the pretexts for Putin to attack Ukraine, about, this myth about Nazis in Ukraine and so on. So history and memory of World War II and the Holocaust plays a key role in today's mass atrocities, in today's violation of human rights, in today's war against Ukraine. So we should, as educators, as scholars, we should be very active agents of all these processes, and we should engage in all these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for the very, very important remark about letting other people hear your voice, and especially now is the time to talk about these things. It's a very, very important point. We still have a few minutes left also for the audience to ask questions. Now, there is a provocative question. If you are looking at the Holocaust discourse and remembrance in your countries, in your countries of interest, and evidently you are not very satisfied with the states of affairs, are there any positive examples? I mean, really European countries, positive examples which you would think, okay, this is about the state which we will try to arrive at sometime. And okay, I'm speaking here from Berlin, and it would be completely out of line to speak about Germany at this point. And I know that it's a very, very contradictory story in Germany, and it's a very difficult one too. So, but any other countries, east or west of your countries, where you would say, okay, this is something which is an example to follow, or where you see, okay, there has been so much done, and that's where we want to look at. Maybe Marta first, and then Alexander and Leonid.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I want to say that we have a long list of countries that are not good examples nowadays, but many people in Ukraine are referring to those countries, like Baltic states, like Hungary, and like Poland nowadays. We all know that there is an obsession in those listed countries about, this complicated question of, local perpetrators, and people. In Ukraine nowadays, some memory agents are trying to copy all these, all these strategies, and they are talking about righteous among the nations, about aid givers, about those who rescue the Jewish lives, and it's very convenient. It's even pleasant, it makes people feel very good about their nation, about their people, own people. But those countries are very, their historical policy, memory politics, and historical narratives are very problematic. But I want to really, in Ukraine context, I really believe that Germany is an example nowadays, but not Germany of 60s, 70s, but current Germany. When I was in the Dachau, in memorial site Dachau 2 years ago, I saw dozens of children from school who visited those places like Dachau, Auschwitz, and other, places. And I was so pleased to see those, children there. I really have a dream that for Ukrainian children, it will be mandatory at least to visit one killing site, former killing site, a memorial site devoted to the Holocaust. It will be the key in their program as well. So I really believe that Germany nowadays could set an example how to deal with the difficult past, how to acknowledge responsibility for this past. Because many people say we are not guilty about, for crimes of, those nationalists and so on. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility, and it's about our future, democratic future of Ukraine. That's why I believe, for me personally, Germany is a good example how to deal with but of course, the last case when, in Ukraine, there was initiative to put, those stones, stumbling stones. But in Ukraine case, one of the stumbling stones was devoted to the mayor of Kyiv, who was nationalist, belonged to Ukraine nationalist group, and who was executed by Nazis for looting Jewish property. So even this idea that was borrowed from German, commemoration practices was somehow adjusted to Ukraine reality, because, we constantly see these growing numbers of nationalist victims of Baban Yar from 20 to 620. And what next, So we are borrowing some practices commemorative, but we somehow, distort them and just in not a very good way, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexander, what do you think? Difficult question.
Я не буду арыгінальным і пагажуся з Мартай, бо сапраўды найлепшы прыклад, які мы сёння маем у Еўропе, гэта сапраўды прыклад нямецкі. Ну і тут трэба сапраўды разглядаць Германію, заходнюю Германію, відавочна, пасля 70-х, 80-х гадоў і да сённяшняга дня. Лепшых прыкладаў насамрэч у Еўропе няма. Астатнія, якія можна прыгадаць, ёсць заходнееўрапейскія прыклады. Ёсць тая ж Францыя, але ж мы ведаем, колькі спатрэбілася Францыі, каб пачаць размаўляць пра французскую калабарацыю, каб пачаць размаўляць пра рэжым Вішы. У нас таксама ёсць прыклад Нідерландаў, якім таксама да сённяшняга дня досыць цяжка размаўляць пра ўдзел мясцовага насельніцтва ў пераследзе яўрэяў. Але гэтыя размовы, гэты дыскурс у Нідерландах ужо прысутнічае. У нас ёсць таксама прыклады скандынаўскіх краінаў, напрыклад, той жа Даніі, дзе пра нацысцкі перыяд размаўляюць усё больш адкрыта. То бок ёсць станоўчыя прыклады заходняй Еўропы, але ж мы павінны ведаць, гэта ўсё краіны са сталай дэмакратычнай культурай. І прычым, калі мы ўжо пачнем размаўляць пра Германію, то тут трэба сказаць, што пераасэнсаванне і перапрацоўка гэтага нацысцкага перыяда пачалася, не скажам так, ужо і добраахвотна. Гэта былі імпульсы вонкавыя, гэта была змена пакалення, гэта быў таксама вельмі цяжкі шлях, які прайшла Федэратыўная Рэспубліка Германія. Ну і сёння мы, канешне, ўжо можам сказаць, што гэты шлях быў паспяховы, таму што Германія і нават крытыкі, я думаю, пагадзяцца з гэтым, з'яўляецца адной з самых стабільных і паспяховых дэмакратыяў сёння у Еўропе. Калі ж мы ўсё ж такі паглядзім на наш рэгіён, усходнееўрапейскі рэгіён, то тут прыкладаў, якімі можна было б захапляцца, сапраўды няшмат. Тое, што назіраецца ў краінах Балтыі, гэта вельмі амбівалентна, назовем гэта так. Тое, што назіраецца ва ўкраіне, тут няма чаго дадаваць, Марта ўсё распавяла. У Беларусі, у Расіі назіраецца звычайная інструменталізацыя Холокосту, і ўвогуле гэта такое пытанне, што мы будзем рабіць з такімі тэрмінамі, як нацысты, пасля ўсяго таго, што робіць сёння расійская ўлада. Калі фактычна ўсё, што расіянам не пасуе, ўсё, што Крамлю не пасуе, абвяшчаецца нацысцкім. Украінскі ўрад нацысцкі, ізраільскі ўрад, як мы цяпер ведаем з расійскай прапаганды, ён таксама нацысцкі, і ў заходняй Еўропе таксама паўсюдна нацысты. Так што гэта сапраўды вельмі цяжкая праца, а калі глядзець на гістарычны вопыт, то такі вопыт, які мае сэнс перанімаць, які паспяховы, які дазваляе выбудаваць дэмакратычную дзяржаву, гэта вопыт Федэратыўнай Рэспублікі Германії.
I wouldn't be very original here and would simply agree with Marta and Alex that Germany's today, present day Germany is really a best example of tackling a difficult question, coping with its past, not afraid to go into the very difficult questions of its past, of very difficult topics. So that's what I can add to this.
Okay, probably if someone living in Berlin and working at the Holocaust Memorial, I could talk for hours about the problematic sides of German remembrance, but I get the point, and thank you. A colleague of mine just said last week, okay, how do you actually want to measure the success of a memorial culture? And also in Germany, I have to say nowadays, in the last 2 weeks, things has been almost literally exploding around us, and not to talk about right-wing extremism on the rise and so on. So it's a difficult thing, and 15 years ago, we were all in a more positive place. Anyway, there is one very, very specific question for Marta Havryshko. This comes from my colleague, Alexandra Wroblewska, and she's from this team of this Connecting Memory team I mentioned just half an hour ago. And she says, thank you very much for the discussions. Around the aforementioned discussion regarding the memory of Babin Yar, there was a great deal of criticism and opposition to the creation of a memory competition. What were the consequences of this protest? Did they bring any correction? Do you see any positive impact on the public discussions? And how to create a framework for these discussions in the future? And very specifically, is the Institute for the National Memory a partner in this?
Thank you so much. I just want to say that 1 month before the beginning of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, I joined the team of Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial Center as a director of one of the institute. Basically, and I developed so many plans, fellowship programs, lecture series, I developed the program of, academic exchange and research, but Putin actually, destroyed everything. And nowadays we are trying, we in the Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial Center, we are trying to still keep our academic journal. We are trying to organize discussions about the Holocaust education in times of war. We are trying to adjust our activity by, as a responsible institution, we should be responsible for our community as well in Ukraine. So we, for example, developed project Closed Eyes about the civilian victims of Russian aggression. So we are trying to deal, but all our architectural projects nowadays are frozen because nobody actually wants to develop this project when there is a high possibility that the next day it could be destroyed by Russian rockets. Because as we know, one of the Russian rocket hit this memorial site in March last year. But what about, so still in Ukraine, we have two competing projects. One is developed by Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial Center, and Y is developed by Ukraine Academy of Science and supported by Ukraine National Remembrance Institute. What is the main problem with the second one project is that we observe some sort of de-Judaization of Babin Yar with the it reminds me actually this concept of, peaceful Soviet citizens who suffered Nazi occupation. And in this project, the huge place is devoted to Ukraine nationalists on the ground, for example, as victims of Nazi regime, and nothing about their complicity in the Holocaust, So it's very, very problematic nowadays. But I really believe that we could develop this project because the conception of exhibition and this historical narrative was developed and didn't change after the change of leadership at Babyn Yar Holocaust Memorial Center. And in developing of this conception, attended so many distinguished, established scholars like Karl Berghoff, Dieter Pohl, Kai Struve, and other respected scholars. Nowadays, we also have this in research board. We have those international, those foreign scholars who are consulting, who are engaging in all discussions. And I really believe that this is, these engaging foreign scholars, international scholars, will actually help Ukrainians not to turn into this nationalistic, victimhood narrative, will prevent all this, Ukrainization of Babyn Yar in general, because this it's a huge temptation nowadays in Ukraine to put this similar to Belarus as, genocide of Ukrainian people, and it's very, very disturbing. So I will, I personally will put my efforts, because in this project, and because I really believe in Holocaust education, and I really want to see finally memorial at Babyn Yar, where we can meet, where we can discuss, where we can educate our youth and elderly people, where we can talk about anti-Semitism, racism, and hate speech. I really believe in this idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We enter the very last phase of this conversation. We only have a few minutes left, and then for example, Alexander has to go and hold a lecture in Saarbrücken. But is there anything which you would like to add, the three of you, something which you really wanted to say into the round before we go? I would like to give you the floor. Anyone? Okay, good. Then I have to say that this was a big pleasure and an honor to speak with you. This is a conversation which will be ongoing. Even if the war would finish right now, these would be very, very contested views. Even if Lukashenko and his regime would be gone next day, these would be at the center of attention of a new discourse about national identity in Belarus. So these are things which will be the basis also for the next years and decades to come. So thank you very much for participating in this. I've been told to speak about that on the 9th of November, the German Society for Eastern European Studies will hold a next lecture and a conference where Alexander Friedman will be participating, and also I will be there. So maybe I'll see some of you there. Also, I would like to say thank you for all those who have stuck with us through this conversation, and I've seen the names of the guests, and I would like to say hello to all of you. And I was very happy that I saw your names there, and I hope you're all doing well. First of all, Marta, all the best for your upcoming lectures and seminar. Alexander, all the best in Saarbrücken, and see you in Berlin. And Leonid, stay strong. These are very, very difficult times, and we are all reaching out to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and goodbye. And probably you will be able to see this conversation on YouTube for years to come. And until the next time, take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.